Envase Technologies creates a suite of solutions that makes it easier to run your trucking business. For drivers and carriers, our solutions put control back in your hands with a TMS, capacity and storage marketplace, and rate management system. Optimize your operations with less administrative headaches and increase the value of your time spent on and off the clock. Envase Technologies, driving progress, delivering innovation. For more information, visit envasetechnologies.com. That's ENVASE Technologies.com.
Hey, supply chainers, wherever you are in the world, this is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey with you today. Are you ready? Let's talk supply chain.
Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. As Sarah said, wherever you are in the world, I want to welcome you to Let's Talk Supply Chains, Thoughts and Coffee. Obviously, I am not Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I am filling in for her today as your guest host. Sarah's actually, I believe, at Manifest this week. So I'm the CMIO, or the Chief Marketing and Industry Officer for Nulogy, and the host of Supply Chain Unfiltered. I'm so excited to be guest filling in today, as our special guest is Amy Augustine, a really good friend of mine. We're going to talk about some trends in supply chain logistics. We're going to talk about career paths and maybe some of the things we've done or how we think we can help some people with some, career coaching, and then how AI may be impacting labor markets. But first, are you ready to find your community? If you're struggling to find a supply chain community of like-minded professionals where you can level up, network, learn about best practices from experts in supply chain, professional development, and marketing, look no further. Sarah created the Secret Society of Supply Chain to provide a safe space, a community for everyone in supply chain. We offer unique opportunities for everyone to connect, grow in three distinct value-packed communities: the supply chainers, the women in supply chain, which we're going to talk about today, and the creative room. From the learn at your own pace, content-rich approach of the supply chainers to the empowering community-focused space of women in supply chain and the marketing mastermind of the creative room. We mean it when we say there's truly a place for everyone. So head on over to the secretsocietyofsupplychain.com to explore which community was made for you. So earlier this week, Sarah hosted an amazing episode 394 with OSA Commerce, which was recorded live on the show floor at Manifest. Focuses on AI, visibility, and data, and you do not want to miss this. I caught it earlier this morning on the replay. It's really, really good. I highly recommend that you take a look. So I'm really excited about our guest today, who is a member with me of the Women in Supply Chain group as part of the Secret Society of Supply Chain. And we just kicked off our cohort. We're still getting to know each other, but our first session was just awesome. We did what I'd like to call like a deep intro, where we shared not just about kind of, what our careers have been like and professional development type topics, but about our families and about what drives us and, where we want to be. And I would say, just really connecting, setting the foundations for future sessions and continued success. So currently we're building the next cohort of the Women in Supply Chain virtual monthly meetup. And for International Women's Day only, so just 24 hours, we're going to offer a special 50% off for women that join the Women in Supply Chain virtual monthly meetup. The time commitment, I would tell you, is really, really reasonable, but the value delivered is just so compelling. And it's, I've been involved in other groups that are, for women leaders, but it didn't have that supply chain focus. And I felt like people didn't understand where I was struggling because finance is really different from supply chain, is really different from, maybe, consumer marketing. So I hope that you will give it a look. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me, reach out to Sarah or any of the folks at Let's Talk Supply Chain, and we'd be happy to share, what's going on and what our experience is. So, all right. So now, enough with the pleasantries. It's time to bring on my special guest for today, Amy Augustine. Yo, Amy, welcome. How's it going this morning?
It's going great. I've got my coffee. I've got my water. It's a little dreary here in Chicago, but I'm pumped up.
Your coffee, is it in your Ember?
No, not yet.
Amy introduced me to the Ember, and I love her for it. So Amy and I have known each other for, I honestly don't know, several years. And we are on the board together for the Association of Supply Chain Management, full disclosure. So Amy, why don't you introduce yourself, what you do, who you work for, and then we'll talk about kind of, some insights, if you will.
Sure. So hi, everyone. Amy Augustine. I'm the Senior Director of Network Supply Chain for UScellular. So I lead our network supply chain group, which has responsibility for helping our network engineers maintain and build out our wireless network. So UScellular is the 5th largest wireless carrier in the United States. We are headquartered out of Chicago, Illinois, and we've been in business. I think this is year number 41. So I have a lot of fun. Yes. And it's been a crazy few years. I'd say even this year has been crazy. So I can't wait to talk about some of the topics that we have teed up for today.
I love it. Oh, look, we've got people coming in. Rob Johnson. Oh, I love it. I saw Sarah a few minutes ago. So welcome, everyone. Hopefully you guys, find some value. Keep your comments and questions and whatnot coming, and we may try to pepper those in as we kind of go through the agenda this morning. So I have to ask you, Amy, did you do Sarah's weekly poll?
I did do Sarah's weekly poll.
So this week's weekly poll was, what's the best advice you would give to your teenage self? In full disclosure, mine was take risks, which I wonder, Amy, what was yours?
So I had a hard time deciding between that one and embrace failure and learn. And I ended up picking embrace failure and learn. Although I think taking risks is closely related to that first one.
Totally. Yes, I totally agree with you. I do think it's really related. So, I mean, what about that? Why embrace failure and learn? Like, what does that mean to you? What do you do differently now than what you did at the start of your career?
So I think now I'm more willing to recognize when I do make a mistake or I have a failure and talk about it, right? And take some key learnings from that and apply for the future. I think my younger self, right? Like, oh, have to get good grades when I'm my teenager, right? Like I got to get in college and everything has to be perfect. And, it doesn't have to, right? You can have something that you fail at. And I'll be completely honest, like I was horrible. My first 3 semesters in undergrad, I had a really rough time. But I took those learnings and those failures and applied myself. And I think about where I am now and where I sit in my career. And, it's you have to take those failures and learn from them and apply what you've learned.
Agreed. It's interesting. I said take risks because I feel like the embracing, like learning was always pretty easy for me. I agree with you. Failure is just not in my vocabulary. But when I look back, like I wasn't intentionally conservative. I just didn't know. Like I didn't have anybody telling me, push yourself here, push yourself there. I kind of went down this path, and for a time, it felt like everything was kind of pre-decided. Like I went to engineering school and then I got a job and then and it was like, I wasn't thinking kind of in other streams, if you will. But I agree with you. The whole failure learn thing, like my first leadership role, I was awful. I honestly, I'm still friends with some of the people that I was like leading. I don't know how they didn't just smack me around, because I didn't, like at the time, I thought being a leader meant telling people what to do, which is like totally not true. Right. So I was like micromanaging. I mean, like you could definitely label me with like the big B word and it was appropriate, And so, those that know me probably will laugh when I say this is the kinder, gentler version of Christine Barnhart. Because I'm still, kind of want to hold people accountable. But yeah, like the whole failing's fine, right? It's okay to fail as long as you learn from those mistakes and learn from that failure, right? So I love it. I love it. I'm checking the chat. I don't see anything, anything pressing. So let's move on because I'm super excited about some of the topics that we have to cover this morning, Amy. In particular, kind of what's happening in logistics. I know your business, you guys are, purchasing items from around the world, you're shipping things, kind of everywhere. So my assumption is that, some of the trends in logistics probably have a material impact on your business. And so I see that we've popped up kind of our reference article from Supply Chain Dive, I believe. I had to put my glasses on. Yep, Supply Chain Dive. So the 8 logistics trends to watch in 2024. And so I'm just going to run through them really quickly, Amy, and then I'm going to ask you like what in particular resonates with you. So one is the Red Sea crisis. It obviously there's a lot of violence. It's threatening rates kind of globally. In addition to that, then, restrictions on the Panama Canal, how that adds complexity, and, just the capacity being restricted there, expected to be restricted more. East Coast labor talks, and what that really means relative to potential stoppages, shortages on the East Coast, which all of this really increases traffic then on the West Coast. Overcapacity remains a problem within the trucking industry. Labor clashes for parcel delivery. We see air forwarders eyeing kind of this growing e-commerce activity. And then forwarders that are really wary of all the geopolitical risk. Is there anything in particular, Amy, that you guys are seeing or that is having a material impact on your business?
Yeah, so I keep a close eye on what's going on in the Red Sea. And so one of the big reasons, and you hit on it, Christine, was we do a lot of ocean freight, right? Like the stuff I move is like 8-foot antennas. Like you don't want to air freight that, right? So it's going to go
Yeah.
on a shipping container from Asia and it's going to come across the West Coast. And so, for us, like I don't want to see rates raise because then I'm going to inherently pay more for my transportation and or product, right? And then when we think of the East Coast labor woes, and most people like sending stuff over to the West Coast, then you have the Panama Canal drought. And so then stuff's going to get backed up, which means time is of the essence for me because I need to get the material into my warehouses so we can meet our build plan for the year, right? We don't build
Right.
cell sites in the middle of winter. All the building happens like starting now. And so for us, time is of the essence. So we keep an eye on what's going on in the oceans because so much of our product is coming ocean freight into the US.
Yeah, and in particular, it just feels like things like the complexity and the disruption is not slowing down, right? Like,
No.
we had COVID, we had the Suez Canal crisis, we had, backups on the West Coast, we had, the labor negotiations on the West Coast, like, and now it's like it's similar issues, but like it's like moving. It just feels like we're chasing all of this disruption. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh, that is a great assessment of it, Christine. It really is like trying to get in front of what's going on so you can make smarter decisions on if I actually have to air freight stuff before putting it on a container, right? And then I'm kind of stuck for 8 weeks until it shows up at port. So it really is how do you evaluate that risk to your overall supply chain and like for us, our build plan? And
Mhm.
then do we have to make that decision to pay more for our transportation versus taking that risk of putting it on the ocean?
And has this impacted your sourcing strategy? Like, are you looking for more, maybe regionally sourced supply, and or are you carrying more inventory, bringing stuff in sooner? Like, how does this impact kind of the day-to-day execution of what you do?
So for us, it's a it's a fine balance, right? So we don't want to bring in a whole bunch of inventory early, because if you think about it from a working capital perspective, it's sitting in a warehouse, I'm paying storage fees, it's not being hung in a tower, and so basically it's not making money for the company, it's not making revenue. So we have to do this fine balance of what's the right time to bring it in so it can get
Mhm.
deployed, but also managing that risk of, hey, are we going to see delays, right? And how do we manage those delays and think about the risk in our supply chain? So it might be we carry some safety stock on some
Right.
hot items, right? Or we make the decision to air freight versus putting it on the ocean.
Right. It's interesting too, because I think there's like, it's, the article talks about really not just the East Coast, but the Gulf Coast as well. And I know there's a lot of people that have talked about the added capacity in the Gulf Coast. It really came, I think, to light during COVID, but you have to wonder if, the labor issues are going to, either stagnate that or slow it down. And obviously labor has been a huge topic in multiple industries. Do you see, similar issues within, kind of that telecommunications space?
Yeah, and so even thinking about like the you know, Gulf Coast ports, when a lot of my material comes in from Asia, right? So that means the boat's going to have to go through the Panama Canal, which, because we know what's going on there, right? It's going to add that time back into when that equipment's going to show up at our warehouses. So it's really, like I said, Christine, this balancing act of like what's the right time, when do we need it, and
Right.
do we have to make decisions about that transportation mode, and maybe not bring everything air freight, but bring enough that we can get started.
Yeah. And basically trying to minimize the impact on both cost and time.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, anything else in particular that stood out for you in the article?
So anytime for me, even like the labor woes, like will make me a little on edge and cagey. Even though like in my operation, we don't send a lot of stuff small parcel, but sometimes we do, and sometimes we do need to get like maybe a little thing for a router, they call it SPF, overnighted to a cell site or to an engineer. And when we have issues with UPS and now FedEx and all, it kind of gives me a little bit of caginess of like, how is this going to impact us? I know from we actually have two supply chains at UScellular, the channel side where we, supply devices and accessories to our stores. They're really concerned about something like that, like the UPS, right? Thinking through last summer, they had to have a backup. Like, what happens if UPS strikes, right? Do we divert everything to FedEx, right? Do we have a balance? So,
Right.
I mean, anytime there's a big labor negotiation, I get a little nervous.
And again, it was like last summer, it was concerns about UPS. I think this summer now it's concerns about FedEx, right?
Right.
So it's like it's just cyclical. You're just kind of chasing your tail a little bit,
Mhm.
right? Yeah. I would agree. And then, the other one that I thought was interesting, the geopolitical risk. And,
Yes.
I think it's easy to get kind of lulled into your bubble. We live in the United States. A lot of my compatriots are out of Canada because that's our headquarters. But, the day in the day out of the geopolitical drama, like it's like on the news to us, but it's not in our homes. But it has a huge impact on large global supply chains like your company as well, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we're seeing delays from some of our major suppliers because they are moving where they're sourcing things in the world, right? And so this trend of moving stuff out of China to other Asian countries is impacting us. We're seeing delays today, um, because they just can't get suppliers up and running fast enough, and it's like this domino effect, right? And so I do think, like, I keep my eye on the geopolitical stuff too, because I just know so much of our stuff is sourced globally and not doesn't come from the US, that
Exactly.
we have to understand what's going on. And if like a war breaks out like in the Ukraine like a couple of years ago, how does that impact us, right? And asking our suppliers, are you manufacturing over there? Any of your raw materials coming from there? Because the domino effect, it
It
will end up
is.
affecting us.
It is 100%. Okay, so let's segue into maybe a happier topic. The supply chain management kind of careers, and in particular, some information from the Association of Supply Chain Management. And as I said in the introductions, full disclosure, Amy and I both are on the board of directors for ASCM. But I think we do that, correct me if I'm wrong, Amy, we do that because it has had such a profound impact on our careers. So why don't you talk to me just a little bit about, kind of how you ended up where you did, and maybe how some of the tools and the education that ASCM provides, kind of helped you with that.
Sure. So I have to go all the way back to coming out of school. And like you, Christine, I was an engineering major, right? So my first job, yes, I was a systems engineer, but I got the travel bug and I actually went into consulting and was implementing SAP for the US Army. And this is how I found my passion for supply chain, right? And so we were implementing SAP, and we needed to create some new supply chain processes for the Army. And so this is where I really kind of honed my skill and fell in love with the profession. When I got to UScellular is where I really got involved with ASCM and used them as a tool. And so I hold my CSCP through ASCM, my certification. And for me, that was a huge step in really solidifying that I am going to be a supply chain professional. This is my chosen career. And, in the years following that, watching the webinars, taking some of the training classes, sending some of my team to training classes through ASCM has really helped me grow as a leader, but also as a supply chain professional. And, there's a ton of stuff out there. Um, if you go just Google supply chain classes, stuff pops up. And I just feel like what ASCM provides is structured, it's developed by supply chain professionals. It's stuff that's going to help you take that next step in your career.
Yeah, no, totally agree with you. I kind of similar. I'm an electrical engineer. We've talked about that. Started out first 12 years with Whirlpool in traditional like operations, engineering, product development roles. And then in about 2008, moved to Mead Johnson Nutrition and just felt like I didn't have the vocabulary that I needed, and had a really, really smart, director, Pat Chandler, and she brought Apex at the time in to Mead Johnson, and I did my CPIM certification. And so I've really kind of been involved since about '08, and then, spoke at conferences and have brought ASCM into the companies that I work for, to help us, especially like I work for a technology company. So I don't ever want to not be a practitioner. I want to stay close to my roots. I identify as a practitioner. I do not identify as a technologist. And ASCM has been a really big part of that because I'm able to connect with other practitioners in, other companies, other fields. And I'm also able then to bring like, they just such rich content and education opportunities like into my business. So like, we have an ASCM corporate membership. I'm encouraging my people to like take some classes, do some professional development, because there's just so much there. And I think you can explore, right? Like, maybe you're in planning and you're like, oh, maybe I want to do procurement. You can, there's a ton of free stuff that you can look at. You don't even have to do like paid stuff. What are your thoughts?
No, I agree. I mean, I think of like I've even done them. I think you have some of the podcasts for
Oh yeah.
ASCM. They're free to listen to, right? Great when you're like in the car driving around or sitting on the train doing your commute. I absolutely agree. I think I was kind of the same thing, like terminology, right? Like I didn't take supply chain classes in undergrad. I just kind of fell into it. I did my MBA in operations management because they didn't have a supply chain option. And for me, like the CSCP, getting that certification helped me with some of those things, like the correct terminology, right?
Right.
And how do you describe this to other supply chain people? And I absolutely agree. I mean, I think even, from the articles and just just like I said, the free events, the LinkedIn Live events, it's just all good stuff.
Agreed.
And the quality of people they get on their events, it's like Sarah, like the really good quality supply chain people you can learn from. And I think it's a great source for anyone who's a supply chain person.
Agreed. Totally agreed. Okay. We're going to segue again. We have about 5 minutes left. And this is actually a blog post that I did after my last conversation with Sarah on Thoughts and Coffee, which was a few weeks ago. I joined Sarah as her guest. It was super fun. And we talked about a couple of different things, but in particular, one of the premises that I came away with was like, is ESG a bad word? And are we still utilizing it? And what does it mean? Do you think, Amy, that the term ESG is going away? How have you seen the focus change?
So here's my thoughts on ESG. I think media has made it a bad word. I think it actually has a place, especially in the supply chain. I also think it's kind of gotten this bad reputation because I think companies try to do the Big Bang Theory, right?
Yeah.
Like we have an ESG program, let's just start and it was like being pushed top down where it really needs to be a grounds up kind of, push where you start small and simple and you build on it from there. Where when it's pushed down, it's kind of like, what? And it's like people just lose their minds over it. And I think we companies kind of took the wrong approach. And I think we're going to see a shift where companies are going to take that grounds up versus pushing it down.
I totally agree with you. I don't know that I care what you call it, right? Like, but you can't ignore it.
No.
You have to think about your impact on the world, your impact on society, your how you govern and how you treat your employees. So I do think regardless of what you call it, I think it's something that companies have to, kind of keep at the forefront. So interesting. We agree. Okay. So, the other thing that came out of the podcast a couple of weeks ago, we talked quite a bit about, labor shortages. And I think people are like, they're surprised that we're continuing to have labor shortages, right? Like we talk about inflation and recession and is the market slowing down? But literally a study that came out in early February said, a study by Descartes found that of the 1,000 decision makers that they talked to, 76% are experiencing notable workforce shortages. And so I think it's, one of the things we wanted to talk about was, can AI help that? Or does it just exacerbate the problem? What are your thoughts, Amy?
So I think AI can help it because I think AI will take a place of what I'm going to call some of like the data analytics, the number crunching, what I would call the very mundane work that a lot of people like get burnt out on.
Right.
I think it changes the skill level than what you need on your supply chain team. You need people who can know how to utilize and strategize with the AI tools to help make better supply chain decisions.
I totally agree with you. And I'm not so sure that it isn't, maybe we're heading to a time where, supply chain and certain supply chain kind of vocabulary and tools are part of tech schools, right? Like
Yep.
we have some amazing tech schools that we've stood up for the high schools in Southern Indiana. But maybe it's not all, like construction management and automotive and, maybe it's supply chain as well. Because I agree with you. I think there's like routine, mundane tasks that nobody really wants to do, that we can automate. And AI is just like perfect for that kind of an operation. So it has just been such a pleasure to talk to you this morning. I love us. We coordinated in our Women in Supply Chain shirt. So that brings us then to the upcoming and recent events portion of our show today. I got to put my glasses on because I won't read these correctly if I don't. So Sarah just recorded last week From Mars to Markets. Great episode of Thoughts and Coffee. You can check it out online. Several other kind of upcoming events. March 14th, how data accuracy drives efficiency at Aeronet Worldwide. And then, this week, she's at TPM, right? So I think through tomorrow. So a lot of activity there. We probably expect not just some podcasts coming out of TPM, but I'm sure there'll be blog posts and future posts by Sarah. So, please make sure you're staying tuned to Let's Talk Supply Chain, to the Secret Society of Supply Chain, and to Thoughts and Coffee, because this is really your one-stop shop to get like just a mix of voices and information and, really good fodder, I think, for supply chain discussions. So thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, Sarah, for letting me try to fill your shoes. I'm hopeless at it, but I appreciate it.